Hey, Charles. Charles, can you hear me?
All right, how we sounding?
Sounding great, man. I need a mic
Cool.
like that. You hear me
You
all
know
right?
what? I got a feeling that mine's like getting ready to take a nosedive, so I got to buy another one. But the Shure mic, Shure, it's been a good one.
Is that the one? Well,
Yeah,
I think it's allowing participants in right now. So, and you not?
I'm all for it. Bring them in.
Yeah, we got some early folks here. We usually don't see it this early.
All right.
Were you
I'm,
were you running this morning or walking or?
yeah, so just went on a walk this morning and trying to keep my breath and record that video at the same time. So,
No, there you go. I didn't know if that was a run or a walk or. I do the same frequently during the day. I'd go walk. Uh, Not as far as I used to because usually I start sweating in the sweltering Dallas heat. But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I used to do a lot more walking. I actually used to do a lot of running, and then I got plantar fasciitis in both feet,
oh no,
just from doing too much running. So I'm one of those. I've got that body type where if I push it too hard, I get hurt, and then I'm injured for like 2 months. So I realized that I'm an old man now. I'm not running. I'm not going any marathons. I'm just going to walk, keep it safe, and just try to push myself. So it's one of those things where you get out of it a little while. I used to like walk for hour 15, hour and a half, and then I started doing an hour and then 45 minutes. And then for whatever reason, I'm like down to like something like 20 and 30 minutes. And I just need to like kick it up. I need to be
yeah.
at 45 minutes consistently.
Well, they say the low intensity, longer volume exercise is actually way better for you. All
Mm-hmm.
this high intensity interval training is actually terrible for your body, and even
Mm-hmm.
some people would venture to say long distance running is not good for you. So, uh, yeah, I think the walking is where it's at.
Got it. All right. So you're going to do all the screen sharing and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so not to give anybody too much of a sneak peek, but likely go through just some opening questions for you, just to get to know you for the first little bit, 5-10 minutes, and vice versa. I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'll basically say, hey, we're going to do a special offer at the end for anybody who sticks around. We can share that toward the end, and then I'll just ask you questions that guide around your sales process. As you do that, I'll kind of show how you might do that in a
Mm-hmm.
CRM,
Mm-hmm.
and have some questions for you to hopefully facilitate more interaction.
Paul, that's awesome, man. Looking forward to it.
Great. Yeah, we'll let the folks trickle in. We've already got 7 people in here, so it's a party.
Yeah. How many did you end up having like for total registrations at this point?
So we have here. Let me type it in here. I think it was 116 when I looked this morning.
Okay.
That's pretty decent.
Cool.
118 attendees, yeah. I'm gonna shut this door real quick. 1 second.
All right.
How's the conference planning coming along, Charles?
It's coming along, man. That's a large part of this week, and I've been talking to a few different venues, so a lot of stuff going on. Actually, thinking about having it one of two places, either kind of the famous Franklin Factory here in Franklin, Tennessee, which is kind of a smaller theater, but where a lot of bands like got their start, so a lot of like history there, or the Country Music Hall of Fame, one of the two. So a little bit more expensive for the second one, so I'm not
Yeah, I
quite
would
sure.
imagine so. And I've been to the latter. I have not been
Uh-huh.
to the former.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got some rich history.
Yeah, so I might do it like closer just to Nashville, just because people would be flying in and different things like that. But looking at a few different options.
Yeah. Feel free to push that too at the end of the call if you want to.
Yeah, okay, that'll be good.
Some registrations. Yeah, we've got a couple coming up. We are going to it's the 8% conference which I had never heard of. It's like Life and Health. It's not
Cody
PNC.
Askins, yeah, they reached out to me to see if I wanted to like do it and sponsor it, but they want too much money.
Yeah,
And
probably.
he does a good job. He's really good at life insurance and stuff like that, but just a little bit kind of outside of my typical clientele.
Correct. Yeah, and we originally were focusing primarily on PNC, but we've had quite a few Life and Health come our way, and we built
Mhm.
around that. We do have one large IMO that uses us pretty much independently across their agents. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say about 65% of my clients, 65 to 70 are PNC, and the rest of it's going to be EB, employee benefits, and there's some like personal lines and some life insurance and annuities and stuff, but those two are my primary.
Yep. Yeah, that's the same with us. Same with us for sure. And I'm just gonna prep my screen to make sure I have the right things pulled up here. For all of you trickling in, awesome to have you here. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes just to get everybody time to join, and then we'll get started promptly. Do appreciate everybody joining early. You get a gold star today.
So I'm probably going to go for about 30, 45 minutes, and then we'll keep it for some questions afterwards. Anybody has any questions? Is this going to be where I'll be able to see all their names or faces, or is it going to be pure webinar? We can't see them.
You should be able to see the name. I'm gonna make you co-host right now.
Okay.
So I think you should be able to see attendees now.
Okay, participants, yeah.
Yeah. And then if you click it, it should open up on the right-hand side where you can see attendees.
Mm-hmm.
I will encourage the lovely folks to put things into our Q&A section. And then Anjali and Montserrat from my side can help us manage that, or I'll try and filter that as well if we don't see it.
Perfect.
What's the weather like today? It looked nice when you were walking.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of beautiful this morning. So I think at the time that I recorded it was maybe like upper 70s, sunny, partly sunny. So nice. Right now it's I think a little bit more cloudy and mid to upper 80s.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's starting to cool down here in Texas, which means we're gonna have some days that are less than 100 coming up soon. So that's gonna be a treat for us.
Yeah. I mean, we even got like 98, 99 there for a little while. So it's starting to cool down.
Yeah.
Getting back into, normal, upper 80s, low 90s. So
There you go. There you go. All right, everyone, we've got about 2 minutes left here to kick off, and we will get going. Thank you all for being here. So why do you, I don't think I've asked you this. Why is it 12X and not 10X?
because Grant Cardone's already got 10X.
Okay, well.
One of my favorite books, by the way. The guy's awesome, but it really is the idea of 12 times. So you're doing something 12 times. And, because I focus a lot on broker of record letters, I focus a lot on not having to quote and just kind of winning the business. Getting 12 new clients, one per month by signed broker of record letter is really the goal going forward. And so it's that 12x.club. That's a URL that I push. I'll probably push a lot more in the future, but 12x.club, trying to bring people into the club who are going to be focused on getting 12 in a year. That's the goal.
Like it's more of a smart goal that way.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we'll talk about 12x in your book of business, right? We'll go from 100,000 to 1.2, but that's just kind of silly. So we'll really kind of focus on stuff that really makes sense.
Yeah. You got to have ways to get there and not just a blanket statement.
Yep.
And give me 1 second. I'm going to plug in here. Rookie move coming to a webinar with low battery, but here we are. That's all right. We're going to roll with the punches today. Okay, about 1 more minute. We've got about 30 people in here, so it is officially a party. And we will go.
even see a couple of my clients in there, or at least one of them.
Yeah, seeing a few here, familiar faces. Good to see everyone. Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started, Charles, if you're ready.
Let's do it.
So yeah, I think the goal of today is to talk through the following. So this is the only slide that Charles and I are going to show today. I'm sure some of you are happy to hear that, but basically the goal of today's call is to go through sales process from Charles. I will show a little bit of the CRM on how you can manage your process, but the whole goal of today is to talk about how agents can write more business, which is why we're here. So Charles, before we kick off, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you for the folks that don't know you. Time to brag about yourself, share successes, and what you do every day.
All right. Well, hey, it's great to be with everybody. So welcome. Been in the insurance business since the year 2000. I blame somebody for getting me caught into this black hole called the insurance industry, but they set me up with a job interview and kind of went from there. But I was an insurance producer for about 10 years, worked at a couple of different agencies. Both really good agencies, and learned a lot. But basically, when I started in the insurance industry, they said, there's a telephone book, kid, go figure it out. And so really just kind of thrown into the deep end to try to figure it out. Did ultimately figure out a couple of things over the course of time. I focused predominantly on construction, property and casualty, janitorial, building site maintenance, a few things like that. Built my book of business a little over $1 million a year in annual gross commissions, and decided that I was being called into something else. So basically rolled my book out and opened up a consulting company back around the year 2011. And since that time, I've been doing basically two things. So two sides of the coin. One, I am hired directly by insurance buyers, mainly construction accounts, to serve as their offsite risk manager, and I really manage the entire insurance program for them. So I don't sell any insurance anymore. I work with their agent, and I might bring in some other agents, or frankly, if their agent isn't a good one, I'll find a new one to replace them and make sure they're putting together the right submission, they're going to the right carriers, and so I just work on everything and negotiate on behalf of the client. No commission, it's just a pure fee basis. I do that. That's one side of it. The other side is kind of my main aspect of coaching consulting, where I work with insurance agents around the country, Canada, and some other countries, but working with them to basically figure out a much more personalized strategic process to win clients, to translate them from prospect to a client. And a lot of it's going to be by broker of record letter. And so really that process of getting the other agent fired and you hired is really where I come in and work with individual agents, both one-on-one, and I do a lot of agency retainer work for clients based upon their individual need.
Awesome. A man of many talents, it sounds like, but sounds like you found your niche as well, Charles. So as we go through things today, again, how to close more business. And really that's talking about from lead in to binding, what we need to do on a consistent basis to make sure that our pipeline is moving in the way that we need it to. So again, as we go through things today, feel free to stop and ask questions. There is a Q&A in the chat. We will try and monitor that as best as we can. I think we've got about 60 people in here right now. So feel free to blow it up and ask us questions. And, we'll do our best to try and teach a couple things around this. Stick around at the end of this call. Both Charles and I will have a special offer for you if you're not a client today. So that'll all be exciting. So without further ado, Charles, if you don't mind, let's start walking through what the lead-in process starts with and how we should handle that. And as we do that, I'm going to demo some of the features in InsuredMine and how you might do this in a CRM platform.
Okay. All right. So a couple of things. One, I just want to first start with a quote, and I want you guys to remember this because I really feel that it means everything. And it is that prospecting is a numbers game, selling insurance is a relationship game. And so a lot about what we're going to talk about here is prospecting, and it is a numbers game from the standpoint that we have to be able to track it. To track it, we have to be able to measure it. And if we aren't putting things into the system, then we're really kind of doing a little bit what I call chicken business. We're throwing mud against the wall to see what sticks. And that really isn't a very good place to be. We don't want to be, quote unquote winging it. We want to actually be more professional and measure what we're doing. So I just want to tell you, prospecting is a numbers game. That's how many accounts you have in your CRM. That's how many prospects you have in your pipeline. That's how many appointments you're setting, how many cold calls you're actually doing, emails, LinkedIn, all of that. We need to be able to measure our activity, because when we measure, we can see where we're actually getting success versus where we're spinning our wheels. And so I would tell you a few different things. I'm going to give you kind of how I typically teach it to insurance agents and insurance agencies on what they do, but each person is a little bit different. So it's going to be dependent upon your strengths, your weaknesses. You know, are you good at cold calling? Are you better at walk-in visits? Are you doing prospecting on a national basis? Or are you only focused on maybe an hour, drive from your house? So a lot of these things come into play when you're trying to figure it out. But I would tell you that I don't care what business you're going after, you need to have about 1,000 different prospects you're working on. Okay. You need to have a large number of prospects that you're working on. And I normally tell agents, I want you to have, let's just call it 1,200. That means you're going to have on average about 100 accounts that you can work on a monthly basis. In the insurance business, as you know, we've got about a 90-day window for when an account starts to come into that renewal mindset where the carriers will accept a submission. So you've got about a 3-month period in which to begin working on things. So we want to have our accounts put into the system, eventually get those X-dated, and we're going to work on the accounts based upon that 3-month period. And so every month, 100 are going to fall off and another 100 on average are going to come on. So you're always going to be working on 300 accounts in that window. You're going to be cold calling them, stop and visit, LinkedIn, sending emails. You're going to be going to the networking events, all of that. And that is frankly a recipe for success. But having just an Excel spreadsheet, we're just so past that. We are so past that. So we need to have something where you can actually see it, measure it, figure out what's going on, set up reminders and so forth. So with that said, come up with whatever your number is. Might be 700 to begin with, might be 400. I would say try to work on as many as you possibly can to keep them into your micro niche and into your CRM. And you need to upload those. And whether it's you individually doing this, or maybe you've got an agency principal or a sales manager who's monitoring this, but you need to have it in there. Now, with that said, I kind of put a little bit of parenthesis around this because I normally am dealing with salespeople. Okay. So salespeople, I am one, so don't take this personally, but we tend to not be the best at data management. We tend to not be the best at going in and typing and making sure all of our calendars are set up and all the notes are in there and so forth. Why? It's because we're hunters. We are hunters and not gatherers. We are salespeople who go out and actually get our own prey. We have to, in order to win business, in order to actually be paid. And so we are much more in relationship rather than data entry and data management. Because frankly, if you were really good at data entry and that was where your focus was, you're probably more of an account manager or an account executive rather than a pure salesperson. So I always keep this in mind whenever I'm setting up a process like this for an agency. I want producers to put what I would consider sort of minimum data, minimum information in the database so that it's enough for us to see what's going on, but it's not going to cause you to spend like hours on end in there, because I want my producers prospecting. I don't want them typing. Right? So things that I want in the system, I want the name of the business. I want, the business owner's name, the contact person, a telephone number, an email address, and try to get the X date, period. That's, kind of the basics of it. Maybe like the city name and the state, whatever it is, but basics. I don't want to really try to have to spend too much time inputting a lot of information because I don't want to have to read it. I don't want to have to track it. I don't want to have to continue to typing, because if I'm spending 10 minutes typing each day doing that, that adds up to a significant amount of time every year. In fact, if you spend on average an hour a day doing service work, doing data entry, that adds up to about 1.5 months out of your entire year you spend in the system doing this rather than actually meeting with your prospects in order to win the business. So we have to do it. We have to make sure that it's there, because if it's in the system and we're actually using it, I actually feel you can probably write 2.5 times more insurance than if you don't have something in a CRM and you're not working it. So I kind of feel that when I'm working with my clients, I'm seeing about a 2.5 times return by them actually using and utilizing a CRM rather than those who do not. So I want you to input that information, but I want you to input kind of the bare minimum of information, at least initially. Then, when you send out emails, when you meet with them, you can start putting in the notes. But that's really, I think, kind of the main start is we have to know what your prospects are. I want them to be micro niched. I want them to be focused on a specific geographic territory and employee size count and so forth, because you're going to have much better success. But you got to begin with that large number, and the larger the number, the better. Well, with that said, 14,000 isn't something you can manage. So it has to be manageable, but it also has to be something that's large enough for that you've got enough accounts to work on.
Great, Charles. That's awesome. So just to reiterate for the gang here, the goal is to start with some sort of market, right? That you can service as a salesperson.
Yeah.
And by that means that you're able to actually go after in a meaningful way and not just say, okay, I'm going to spray and pray this ocean of folks here.
Yeah. So I would say, working on micro niches is something that I spend a lot of time on. Like, for example, construction's an industry. It's not a niche. Lots of people say they can do construction, but can you do, residential plumbing subcontractors? That's a different issue. So let's say you were going to do furniture stores. Maybe I can use that example going forward. If you were going to just put together a list of furniture stores around, outside furniture, inside, high end and so forth, but furniture stores, that really allows you to become an expert over the course of time. You can put together services and your scripting, your messaging, your emails, your branding. Everything becomes so much easier when you start with one particular focus of the account that you're going after. And so putting together that for, say, furniture stores, I think is critical, rather than just coming up with 70 different, industries and just kind of throwing them in there and not really knowing a whole lot about them.
100%, Charles. So, obviously InsuredMine is an insurance specific CRM. Our messaging, our targeting is very specific, and our product is very specific. Anytime that we can do that, we can be highly personalized without having to actually do the personalization ourselves, which we'll talk to here in a second. So taking a step back from what Charles just said, let's say we put together 2,000 prospects. What I can do is basically put together an Excel file wherever I pull that data from, whether it's from a lead list vendor, it's from, I found it on a website and I download the Excel, and I can choose what different fields that I want associated with that. So that means first name, last name, different tags that might be the industry, like he just talked about in construction or plumbing or whatever you may niche down on, their email, their X dates, their date of birth. And then I would be able to bulk upload that into the system, drag and drop that Excel file, and it fills out this contact list. From there, I have all the leads in my prospect or my leads, whatever I want to call it, or I can dump them automatically into what we call a pipeline manager. So if you're not familiar with this, it's your typical Kanban system of what you're doing and different stages during your sales process, from taking them from lead to binding, and what might need to happen in between there is what we want to start thinking about. So again, getting those leads in, understanding what we can about those leads so we can target them in a more impactful way. And then what happens when we get leads, Charles? What should we be doing? What automation can we do? And how do we manage 1,000 leads at one time?
Yeah. So I normally have my clients go through their list once, maybe twice, with just the idea of discovery. Okay. Because you might have 1,000, 1,200 leads or whatever it is, you stick them in there, but you don't have necessarily the X dates. You don't have the email addresses. You might not have the name of the person who handles it. So I would tell you that we want to make phone calls to each of these with not trying to speak to decision makers or trying to set appointments necessarily, but just trying to do the data discovery. I want to know two basic main things. I want to know the email address for the person that handles the insurance, and I want to have the X date. The X date is most important because if you're working on something that's in the buying window, the rate of success goes up dramatically. So I would tell you that it's not enough just to input a bunch of accounts and just kind of work on them. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I want us to go through all of them, and I can probably knock out 100 to 150 calls in a day of just trying to find out who's the person that deals with it, their X date, and so forth. And if they happen to be coming up within that 3-month window, then I'm going to try and maybe push for the meeting while I'm on the call there, maybe ask some other information and so forth. But really the goal is just the discovery. I just want to have that information.
100%. So now it's taking a cold list and trying to figure out who's warm within that. And you're starting to segment your list at this point. So whether we're doing it from a pipeline or from a contact management standpoint, there's a number of things that we can do right when we start uploading the leads. So when I go into this automation section, and just about, every CRM worth their salt may have something like this, it might be we're going to email them automatically if we have their email address, or maybe it's just a task. As Charles mentioned, let's call the customer to collect information on the deal card so we can set up our automations of what we want to happen when that lead comes in. And then I can manage things through a task list where it says, quote customer or call customer, and I call right from here. And I can just bang out my 100, 150 calls. While I'm doing that, I'm going into the person. I'm taking notes on this person. They said, call me tomorrow. Boom. I'm going to my next call. I'm checking these things off as I go through them. And maybe during this time, we're qualifying. So maybe we've gone from lead to the point where we've actually contacted them and they've talked to us. And maybe based on that, we want new automation to start, or we want to now focus on this section of the pipeline because we know we have now 10 warm leads from the 100 that we called. A little bit of how you might be able to do that with the technology.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize the fact of how important it is to get those policy X dates. You may know that, you may believe that, I might be preaching to the choir here on that, but the level of success goes down dramatically if you don't know when your accounts are coming up for renewal. And so, I would say, just drop everything you're doing for a 2-week period and just get that list as qualified as possible from the standpoint of at least when they come up. Because we can send email drip on them over the course of a year. We can send, an email once a month, every, 2.5, 3 weeks, whatever it is. But we want to be focusing on contacting and working the accounts when the insured in their own mind realizes that they're in that renewal window. And for them, it might only be like 45 days before the renewal. That's what they might be thinking as their renewal window. So we have to be working on those accounts during that time. Otherwise, we're not going to get really good results.
And that's part of that qualification period. It's just as much when you call somebody, seeing if they're a good fit as you're a good fit for them. And that's based around their X date, right? Maybe they're not ready right now, but they're going to be ready in 9 months. And are you ready to target them at that time is now the question.
Yeah. And, I would say when we have it, let's use that example. If they're not coming up again for 9 months, the worst thing that you could probably do is just let it sit there for 9 months and not do anything with it. Right. And unfortunately, that is what the vast majority of insurance agents are doing. Now, the good thing is that's what your competitors are doing. Right. So if you didn't do that, if you had some kind of a targeted approach to somehow on a consistent basis be, do reaching out, whether it's LinkedIn or email or a walk-in visit or whatever it is, but you're working on those and they're getting something from you on some kind of a consistent basis, you're going to be much, much better off when it actually comes up to the point of them being in that renewal window.
Right. And this may be a number of things. It may be emails, texts going out, and this can be based around that X date that you've gathered. So what I'm showing right now is a list of automations around an X date. So they might be in your pipeline, but they might not be ready to buy right now. So we say, okay, number of days before the X date, we actually want to start automation going out to them saying, hey, I know we chatted earlier this year. I know you're 90 days away from your X date. Why don't you schedule a meeting with me or let me know if you still want to talk, right? And it can be very simple, very text-based. Doesn't have to be some long marketing-looking email to accomplish what you're looking for.
Yeah. I know of one client of mine on the West Coast. Their agency has done a very good job at this. They have a lot of email addresses and the agency handles it, not the producer, because then we can track it, we can manage it, make sure it's happening. But we send out regular emails to accounts and they send out like a drip campaign, but once that 90 days hits, it's an email every week. And they are very topical about specific problems in their industry, in their business. And we're waiting in essence for that decision maker to reply back to us. And as soon as that reply comes back, they take that, hand it off to the producer and say, here you go. Well, you're welcome. Right. And those producers based upon that are getting anywhere from 10 to 15 really strong leads each month from people, contractors in this instance, that are already interested and want to have a conversation. In their mind, they're wanting to get a quote. From my perspective, then we start, really kind of focusing on the broker of record letter and how to transition that into a buying client from that standpoint. But nothing happens without the appointment. Nothing happens without the interest. And so it is that drip campaign, based upon that, is really going to get you a lot of success.
So again, it's taking them from cold to warmer. And that's based on the information that you find out about them or the data that you can grab from them. So something that we actually do at InsuredMine is if we build a list of good fit clients, we may start emailing them, right? Then from there, you can check, and this is all dummy data, but you can check how many you've sent, who's opened, who's clicked, who's bounced. So if I'm a sales leader or running an agency, I'm going to tell my reps to go call the ones that are clicking or opening, or I have seen multiple opens on multiple emails. And that allows me to drill down even further from absolute cold to kind of warm, and then take them into that process of discovery from there.
Yeah. And to go along with that, just kind of using that idea of, are people opening up or not? To focus on the ones that are being opened, it's wise, right? It makes sense because there's some level of interest there. And so you're much more likely to be able to transition that into a new business appointment. The same thing kind of goes even in the process, like after you've met with the insured for the first time. We're talking about sales here. If I'm meeting with that prospect and they're not willing to give me the signed broker of record letter, which is a red flag. If they're not willing to give me access to the carriers I want to have access to represent them in the marketplace, that is a huge red flag. If they're not willing to, to assure me that they're not going to give my quote to their incumbent agent to give them last look, that's a huge red flag. So why would I continue working on something that's giving me all these red flags? Right? Save yourself all that extra time that you would be wasting going after unqualified business owners who really aren't they're not quality prospects, and focus all your time on the ones that truly are, which is why you have to have a bigger number up front. You're dripping on them over the course of time with value. Therefore, you're going to be working on the ones and working with the ones that are more likely to give you the business.
Yep. So, and that leads to a bigger point of pipeline management and pipeline hygiene, right? For me as a sales leader, I'd actually rather have half the pipeline than a very bloated pipeline of leads and contacts and accounts that are never going to close. So Charles, maybe you can talk a little bit more about sales hygiene and pipeline management.
Yeah. So giving you an example of two different agencies that are clients of mine on two different sides of the coast, the West Coast and East Coast. One agent input, I think it was 56,000 emails that he purchased from somebody, in Pakistan or something like that. Stuck them in there, and the agency was paying for all of this and didn't even realize they were paying for all these emails that were going out. Not getting any kind of response. These just weren't qualified leads, and it wasn't really working. That agency was with one of the sales companies out there that does CRM. So it's just costing a lot to actually send those. It doesn't work. Another example of one is a smaller agency where they were using a different kind of CRM, but nobody was really tracking it. And therefore, the producers really weren't using it. I asked this specific producer who had some success up to that point in her career. She'd been in the business for about 5 years and she had sold some insurance, but really for the last year and a half hasn't been doing as much. And so I asked her, I said, well, let's do this. Log into your CRM, share your screen, and let's kind of see what's in there. And she kind of looked at me a little bit embarrassed because she finally said, I haven't even been in it in months. And I said, well, log in. And she couldn't even remember her login number. And it's this is the obvious reason why you don't have appointments set. It's the obvious reason why we're not selling any insurance, because we're not doing the basics of what a professional would do. I mean, amateurs can play sports, right? They play sports. They don't measure what they do, and they're not really trying to win a trophy. The difference between an amateur and a professional is that professionals need to make money. Professionals need to earn a living, and this is your professional career. We really need to take this seriously. And so I think then monitoring the CRM is certainly more important than just kind of creating the CRM to begin with, right? Just sticking all those accounts in there. The quality of the accounts is absolutely important, and we need to be making sure that we're checking up on them. We also got to be setting up some kind of tickler calendar things that are taking place so that when these come up, we know what we're supposed to be doing on the accounts. We need to continually monitor that. Otherwise, we're not going to get a really good result in what we're doing in our prospecting. So we have to watch it. We have to make sure these things don't pile up. I would say that when you come into the office, one of the things you do is you log into your CRM and it stays logged in on your desktop all day long.
Yep.
Because we're going to be going into it, kind of checking some stuff and, adding some details as they come up. But it's just one of those things where if it's just not available to you right there, it does not get used.
Correct. And the best CRM is the one people use, right? But we also go by a phraseology here at InsuredMine. If it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen, which is another one that a lot use. So yeah, maybe it's coming in and just dropping a task on somebody, right? And then managing a task list every day. One of the things that I think is pivotal for salespeople, Charles, that we've talked about a lot is managing your calendar, right? So if it's beginning of your day for an hour, end of your day for an hour, whatever that time frame is, every day to go handle your current tasks, to do your outbound calls, to manage your pipeline and just see where you're at. That type of consistency, I believe, is very, very important. If not, we just end up chasing whatever's right in front of us all day long.
Mm-hmm. For me, when I'm doing sales training or consulting with agency principals or producers, one of the first things that I do, it's in the very first module of my digital course, Millionaire Producer School, which you stay at the end of this webinar. You're going to learn a little bit more about that as well. A little plug there. But the first module is all about setting up your perfect, ideal calendar for that week. It is amazing how often we just wing it. We show up, we're talking at the water cooler, we're checking out email, we're not really doing anything in a very systematic way. And so we really kind of have to focus on where are we going to set up our prospecting? When are we going to do our cold calls? And how many are we going to do in that hour block and email and, doing the CRM and doing the ticklers that come up, in that calendar. We have to be more systematic about it. I don't mean that you're going to be a slave to your CRM. You're not going to be a slave to your calendar. We utilize it as a tool. It is there to actually help you be much more successful across the board. So we need to allow our calendar to actually become that tool. We need to allow your CRM to become the tool that helps you sell more insurance. It's going to help you and the agency make a lot more money when we utilize it in a certain way. So for me, when I'm working with my agents, if they are working from, say, 9 to 5, then every single minute of the day, Monday through Friday, I need to see where you're going to have things set up for prospecting. It's an ideal week. It doesn't mean that other things won't come up. A renewal happens, a claim happens, but I need to see prospecting on every minute of the day, at least in half-hour time blocks on what you're going to be doing, cold call, email, walk-in visits, and so forth, because if it ain't happening, if there's no schedule for it, it's not going to happen. Therefore, it's not measurable. Therefore, we really don't know what works and what doesn't.
100%. And we're both salespeople here, Charles. So we get that this is something that we have to do ourselves. I frequently call salespeople golden retrievers with ADD, and I'm talking about myself when I say that. It's so easy to get lost in the shuffle every day. So the beautiful thing about a CRM too is helping with that management and then recording what's happened on that deal. So we never have to forget what's happened, whether it's texts or emails that have gone back and forth. A great CRM is going to have texting capabilities. It's going to have automated emails or emails that you can send from your Outlook, your Gmail that automatically log because you already have that contact in the system. So you're not having to drag and drop it. What's great about this too, with InsuredMine, and shameless plug here, is this data can transfer to the agency management system when the time is right. So there's no he said, she said from the CSR or account manager. There's no E&O issues on what was emailed, what was texted, what was talked about. And things like checklist items can be used. If you want to prevent deals from going to the AMS before certain things have been done, or you want the management of saying, hey, salespeople, XYZ needs to be done before you quote them, you can actually prevent a deal from moving forward into a new stage before that happens. So some of that operational management and some of that efficiency is what we might look to gain here during the sales process.
Mm-hmm.
So Charles, when you think about measuring from a sales leadership or agency perspective, what do you think about from a data perspective across the pipeline?
Well, The nice thing about working with producers is I can tell very quickly whether or not you're worth our time. And that is, have you sold anything? Like if it's one thing to say I'm making 100 cold calls a day and I'm not getting anything. Well, great, we can work with that. But if you're making 3 cold calls a day and you're saying I'm not getting anything, that's a different issue.
Mhm.
So, really being able to kind of like just track that and have some goals and so forth. From just a numbers standpoint, whenever I'm like, there's no reason whatsoever that prospecting should happen or should not be happening every single day, even if it is a small amount. I would normally say that even like, for example, in an hour, you should be making a minimum of 15 cold calls in an hour. You're probably more likely to do 18 to 22, but 15 is a minimum. Emails, you can send it out, in a much larger amount, based upon, some kind of a drip campaign. Walk-in visits are the least scalable, but each way of prospecting has to have some kind of minimum expectation, per day, and that's where the calendar comes into play. Because I know that if we start tracking somebody's numbers, just using cold calling, if somebody's making a certain number of calls, we can come up with a pretty good ratio on how many appointments are being set based upon the calls that are being done. Same thing goes with emails and walk-in visits and your time on LinkedIn and so forth. It all becomes scalable. But if we're not tracking anything, nothing at all becomes scalable. So we really just need to have certain minimum expectations on a daily basis. With that said, I think that one of the more difficult things for producers to do is because we get into that process of prospecting, we don't sometimes then input the information into the CRM, which then
Right.
becomes useless. So there's 2 trains of thoughts here, and I don't take a hard stance on either one, although I lean towards one. Okay. The first one is that you're inputting the data as you're going along. Okay, so you're making the cold calls, you speak to somebody, you're taking the notes, the call's finished, you finish up your notes, you set your calendar, and then you move on to the next one. I would prefer that to happen, but at the same time, I also know that it kind of can be negative because I know that you will make more phone calls if you just like make a phone call after another, and then you keep some of the notes on a piece of paper, for example. Then if you do it that second route, if you're making 20 phone calls, then I say stop, then you go in and input the data once your cold call is done. You input the data immediately. You don't do it an hour later. You don't do it a day later. You don't do it next week. I have a client that does it every Friday afternoon, and I say, "How's that working out?" And he said, "Not very good. Like he's backed up 3 weeks." I said, "You're right. That ain't going to happen." So that's not a very good process. It's not scalable. So we have to create something that is a little bit more scalable. I think it works better if you do it right off the bat. But if you don't, you continue gather the data, and then you do it immediately thereafter while it's fresh.
Yeah, and I try and do it daily myself, but I do have a 15-minute block at the end of every day. It's called Data Daily Cleanup. And I still use notebooks myself.
Mhm.
I still take pen to paper, but at the end of the day, I got to make sure those notes are getting in there.
Yep.
And some of the stuff that I was showing you earlier, once you get more sophisticated, I think, day one is working on this process, right? Then from there, you can start tracking how many calls it takes to get to contact detection, how many contacted are going to go to gathering information, how many then are going to take a quote, and then what your close ratios are within that. From there, you can basically see, if the salesperson is doing what they're supposed to be doing, how do we scale a business to a certain growth rate that we're trying to look at, which a lot of times we're hoping and praying we get to that growth rate without the numbers to back it up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to add to this, why this is nice. What I like about InsuredMine here is that you can actually see it like they have these columns, right? So I can see where my accounts are at in any part of this process, right? So I've got your leads, I've got them contacted, gather information. I can see then from an agency sales manager or a partner or a principal, I can see where are my producers struggling, right? Because if they're contacting 100, but they're only setting up two appointments, like a 2% return on the investment there is not that strong. But let's say they are setting up a lot of appointments, but they're just not translating those into new business. They're going through lots of quotes, but they're not actually transitioning those quotes into bind orders. So then we have a closing problem. So then we can really focus the training on what is needed for that specific producer, because all of your producers are different. It doesn't matter if you've got 2 producers or 20 at your agency. They're all unique. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And some people are really good at one thing, not as good at others. Some are very good at policy breakdown, and others are not. Some are just very nervous about asking for the business, where another one will just go for the jugular, right? So we have to be able to figure out where is the bottleneck inside the actual funnel.
100%. And I could talk about this all day with you, Charles, because, a lot of times we know there's a revenue problem, but we don't know why. And going to a salesperson and saying, make more dials is one thing. When it comes to, closing those dials is a different thing. So for instance, the chart I'm showing you right now is deals that have moved to stages, right? So Leo DiCaprio is moving a certain amount of pipeline into a certain stage. Maybe he's not getting enough pipeline into quoting. He's really good at getting, the contacted stage. He's dialing a lot, but, he gets them to a certain stage and then they just fall off. Some of this data that you're looking at is going to then tell you a story of your agency, or maybe it's pure pipeline that they're building. They're just not getting enough pipeline in there every day. Not enough deal cards are moving through. One of the other things that we look at, if I can go to the right one, is a weighted forecast, right? So when I think about maybe the quoting stage, maybe my quote to close ratio is 50%, right? So at any time, my weighted forecast of all my pipeline stages should equal 100% of my goal or more, or I'm not going to hit my number, whatever that number may be as a sales leader. So for instance, I weight my quote sent. I've got $240 in there. I can accurately say that I'd close $120 over a certain amount of time. And all of these stages should add up again to 100% of whatever that goal is. So this, as a sales leader, should tell you, or an agency leader, hey, I need more pipeline in these stages. We need these activities to make that happen, or I need to hire more people to make that happen. So, Charles, I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I think we have about 9 minutes left. What are we missing today that we haven't gone through?
So if prospecting is a numbers game and selling insurance is a relationship game, I would tell you that the fortune is in the follow-up. Okay. And by the follow-up, I mean, that is the consistency of reaching out to your prospects. But you also have to have multiple ways in which you're reaching out to these people. Okay. So let's say I've got 1,000 prospects. I send out 1,000 emails. If I'm only doing that one form of prospecting, I'm only going to have a certain ratio. Let's just call it a 3% return, right? If I'm getting a 3% return on my emails, the problem though is that the vast majority of your prospects are not going to respond to email. It is not the way in which they are comfortable or the way that is most convenient to them. Please listen to me when I say that. It is not the most comfortable for them, and it is not the most convenient for them. So then we also want to incorporate a second and a third, possibly a fourth way in which we're prospecting. That is a telephone call. We're probably going to get maybe another 3% return on the telephone call. Then we also incorporate walk-in visits where it might be the most comfortable and convenient for people. Maybe they want people face-to-face. We're going to increase it then another 3%. So instead of having just a 3% return on our prospecting efforts, we now have a 9% because we have created layers of prospecting, because every single person works different in ways in which they respond to solicitation. Okay. So we have to follow up with our prospects in different ways over the course of the year. As an example, if somebody calls me up at 5:30 while I'm eating dinner with my family to try and sell me something on my cell phone, I'm going to hang up on you. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, you're not going to get the business. That is not a convenient time. And frankly, I don't want to be sold that way. But if I was to be sold via a website, or I buy a lot of stuff even on social media, totally works for me. In fact, email probably is the best way for me to ever be solicited. Telephone is usually not the best. Social on LinkedIn, I will always do that because I look at it for business purposes. But if somebody sent to me on Facebook, I'm going to unfollow you. Like, we're not going to be connected because I don't use that for that purpose. Where I'm going with this is that every single insured, whether it's personal or commercial P&C, health benefits, doesn't matter. Every single person is different on how they want to be prospected to. I realize that you might be more comfortable in one way, but you are really becoming, handicapped, if you will, to one form of prospecting if you do not create at least a three-legged stool to your prospecting approach. I feel 4 is better, but to have a 3 prospecting prong, cold call, email, LinkedIn, for example, if you did those 3 things, you're going to have supernatural results in your prospecting, and you're going to have a much better, you're going to have much more revenue coming in over the course of the year, because you're then working with your prospects in ways that they are comfortable and convenient to them. So I would definitely highlight that. And I know without hesitation that the vast majority of people on here do not have really any kind of a follow-up program for their prospects. If you did have a follow-up program, I think you would probably double what you do in an annual basis. But most agents simply do not. And when I say that, I mean most of my paying clients who pay me thousands of dollars every single month and or year are the same people who don't have any kind of a follow-up program in place. It's just very difficult to do. It's very difficult to put it into place, and it's uncomfortable because that means that you are prospecting in ways that you're not necessarily used to. However, when you do it, everything changes and everything gets better. If I can even add maybe one more thing, for those of you who are agency principals, I would encourage you to try and take some of this off the shoulders of your producers, specifically the email campaign. I feel that that can be done better from an agency perspective than the producers will ever do themselves. And frankly, I think it's also important from the standpoint that if a producer ever left or was let go, then the agency has that asset there. You can actually manage it. You can bring in more accounts. You can set up the tags. You can do it, because producers, unfortunately, just don't know how to do that kind of stuff. So you're going to end up getting a much better result when you have a follow-up program, because frankly, that's where the fortune's at.
100%, Charles, spot on again. So one of the questions earlier is, can we kind of niche our follow-ups as well? So you can put a label on a deal, which is basically a tag, something custom on there, and new automations can start based on that, or I can put them into different deal stages. There might be different triggers that this is happening. And as Charles mentioned, this can be done from an agency standpoint, right? Where leads come in and you're automating, and that outreach is coming from that individual. It's coming from their unique Outlook email with their name on it, with the person's name on it that you've uploaded into the system, and it looks like a unique email from that person. So it doesn't have to look like it's coming from the agency or some spam email. It can look like it's coming from them. So, all right, Charles, I think we've probably exhausted all the folks with a lot of information here today. I know you had a special offer, if you want to share that.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that I have is a digital course that is my flagship training called Millionaire Producer School. And it teaches the broker of record letter process kind of step by step. It teaches you how to set up your calendar. It teaches you your branding, your scripting, how to ask for the broker of record letter, and how to actually win it. Currently, it sells for $297, but I told Tucker here, I said, look, if those who come on, if they want it, I'll give it to them for $197. And you'll have unlimited 24/7 lifetime access to it. And again, it teaches you the entire broker of record letter process from start to finish. $197. If you want access to it, just send me an email at charles@permissiongroup.com, and I'll send you an individual link to it for $197.
Awesome, Charles. So yeah, I just dropped his email in the chat. Charles did as well. The other offer, if you're not a customer of InsuredMine, we're offering 10% for the next month through August 26th off for any new licenses that you purchase. So a couple quick offers there for you. I believe, and I'll have to get the lovely gals in marketing here on the call to help me out, but I believe everybody on this call will get the recording after this. In case you missed anything, Charles and I are always available. You've got our emails here. You can reach out directly to us, LinkedIn. Charles, any parting words before we let everybody go?
I just appreciate what you're doing. I've seen the CRM, have used it. I have clients that have used it. It works very well, but like anything else, if you don't actually use it, you're not going to get really good results. And that goes the same for a CRM. It goes the same for making phone calls. If you don't make phone calls for a couple of weeks, it's going to be really hard to make that first phone call. So the consistency of it is so critical.
You got to pick this thing up. It makes money for you. So we'll use that as a closing note. Yes, everybody will get the registration. Who registered will get the link to the recording. Super excited to have everybody here today. Thanks for joining, and hope you learned a little bit.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Take care.